What if the biggest challenge facing your dairy farm isn't milk price, labor, or feed costs, but the conversations happening around the kitchen table, or rather not happening? Farm transition is one of the most important yet most difficult journeys that families navigate. That's why we're excited to bring you the Farm Forward Conference. We'll be featuring renowned family farm coach Elaine Fraze and a powerhouse panel of transition experts to help farm families move forward with clarity and confidence. Uplevel Dairy Podcast is proud to host the first Farm Forward Conference, a full day dedicated to empowering farms and their transitions, on March 27th, 2026 at the Farm Wisconsin Discovery Center in Newton, Wisconsin. Register at the link in the show notes or go to upleveldairy.com under the Farm Forward Conference tab. Today, we are resharing part 2 of our previous conversation with Michigan dairyman Tommy Oesch of Swisslane Farms, where he talks about the painful mistakes and putting together an advisory team to move their transition forward from the senior generation to the current generation at Swisslane Farms. Tommy will be sharing his experiences live at the Farm Forward Conference on March 27th. This conversation is a sneak peek of what's in store right here today with Tommy Oesch on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. Welcome to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This is the podcast for dairy producers and professionals who are committed to moving our industry forward. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and each week we bring you the leaders, the lessons, and real-world stories from the people who have built the dairy business we know today and those who are shaping its future. Join us on the journey by following Uplevel Dairy on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and subscribe at upleveldairy.com to get new episodes and our Dairy Insights blogs right in your inbox.
It doesn't matter how good your education is. When you are responsible for all of the decisions, you have to live with the consequences of your decisions. And some of those were pretty painful. So we made some big mistakes in hindsight, but I don't know how you avoid that, right? There's only one way to avoid that, and that's to not transition.
So when you talk about making mistakes and really having the freedom to make mistakes, right? Like having the permission and the ability to make mistakes, that speaks to the fact that you were stepping into more decision making. Because if you weren't making decisions, you're not the one that's making the big mistakes, right? And that's okay. That's how you learn.
I'll share a pretty big kind of, and it gets a little bit into another topic, but who you're going to work with from a consulting standpoint, because not every consultant is a fit that was a fit with your dad. And one of the big mistakes that we made, and it was mostly on me, I fancied myself a nutritionist after working in the nutrition business for 6 years. And so I was pretty adamant that I was going to do our nutrition. Well, that passed me up so fast when I left the day-to-day and went into day-to-day management, and I hung on to it for way too long, and it cost us a ton of money. I should have let go of that thing. Like, probably should have never even tried it, to be honest with you. But it was a really painful lesson to learn. The pros at that do it every day, like, you can't manage dairy and be a nutrition pro. Not at the scale we were at. I know some people manage it, but I certainly could not. I couldn't go do at the time I was doing a lot of the herd work, and yeah, that was a huge mistake that we made. And it falls largely on me, because I think my partners wanted to move on from my expertise way sooner than I was willing to let it go. It was hard, but yeah. I still look back and I can see where GPS took over from what I was doing, and the escalation in our performance was pretty staggering. And I still look back at that. I'm just like, what an idiot. What was I thinking?
So would this be maybe an example of learning, like, first of all, what you hold on to and what you let go of as you take on more responsibility? Like, is that kind of how it worked out?
That's a really nice way to put it. you cannot be an expert at too many things when you're managing a business. As far as you can't be your own consultant. That just doesn't work.
That's a good way to put it. And I think that's something that will resonate with other people too, right? Sometimes we have to recognize our own limitations, where we become the bottleneck or we become the greatest risk to our business because of the things that we are doing or not letting go of. And so how would you say that experience has impacted you since then when it comes to how you manage others and how you manage yourself?
Our leadership team always now kind of, as we're starting to work with new consultants, we vet them, make sure they're a good fit for us, like personality wise and expertise wise. But then when we hire somebody, we listen to them. We pay for good advice and then we put it into practice.
So when you talk about those advisors that you surround yourselves with and allowing them to do what they're good at and trust them, how many seats around the table are the same now as they were when your older generation were the ones in the key management and ownership roles?
You know, it's interesting. My dad and uncles did a pretty good job with team meetings. Like I feel like they were kind of ahead of their time having the team meeting. I can remember when that all kind of started, when you had the repro specialist, you had the nutritionist, you had the vet, you had the financial consultant, and then the herdsman and the feeder, and then the ownership and the leadership all sitting around the table going through the performance of the dairy on I can't remember if they did it quarterly or semi-annually. And I remember being in those meetings. They had made a lot of really good decisions in those team meetings and got every buy-in from everybody. But as I think about who was around the table back then, and I still have a really good relationship with some of those people, but none of them work for us anymore. It's just our business has changed and we've needed different help. And so I think that those people were all instrumental in getting our business to be what it is. The things that got you where you are today are probably not the things that are going to get you where you're going to be tomorrow, right? Like, we've had a lot of really good help along the way, and I don't ever want to discredit any of the people that have been really instrumental in, because a lot of those people that were around that table at the time were really instrumental in my career, right? Like, they helped me find a job off the dairy. They helped me come back to the dairy. There was a lot of really critical people sitting around that table that are not anymore, but that doesn't mean they weren't instrumental in our business at the time.
They served the needs at the time, but maybe not to take to the next level. And I think what comes up as you talk about that, Tommy, is you have to be really clear on where you're going to know if those people at the table can get you there. And that's something that we've talked about this before on the podcast here, but I'll maybe just ask you to revisit it a little bit. You and these multiple generations have a very clear path and a clear plan that allows you to be able to say, okay, who is the right fit? Who do we want at the table with us? I'm going to even borrow that question that you talked about earlier that your cousin asked of you when you were laying out your core values of who would you take on the mission to Mars and who's going with you because they can help you get further faster. Would you agree with that? Is that a good assessment of what you've done?
I mean, we have a very, very aggressive growth plan, right? Like, we're at 5,000 cows today, and our goal is by 2032 to be at 10,000. So we need to double in the next 8 years. And that speed, that pace is not comfortable for everybody. And so you can find out pretty fast what somebody's comfort level is with your pace of growth, right? Because it doesn't fit everybody's ideology and everybody's fancy, if you will. You know, you hear a lot about diversification in the industry right now. And that was something my dad and uncles talked about a lot. They were diversified in crops and dairy. They grew they had a lot of cash crops on top of the dairy. And for them, that model worked. For us, we're undiversifying. If anything, we're saying, no, dairy is what we do, and that's all we do. And we want to do it really well. And so that begs a certain person into your sphere of influence. And when I say your sphere of influence, those that are influencing you, some people want to be working with that mentality and some don't. And that's okay. There's a consultant out there for everybody, but we need people who understand our pace and our tolerance for risk right now and are not pulling back the reins unless it's appropriate, right? But you can't have people on the team that are constantly like, oh, we can't do that. We can't do this. We can't do that. Can't die in the poorhouse. That's what my dad said.
Oh, that is a highly quotable highly quotable saying. Oh, but yeah, this whole thing with finding the right people to be at the table with you to move forward. Who are the people that sit at your table now when you have the big conversations about your aggressive goals for growth and how you're going to get there? Who's at the table? Who are you listening to?
We're listening to our CPA, who's kind of always giving us a gauge on business equity and all that. For years, we worked with Steve Bodart from Compeer, and he helped us in a lot of ways get to where we're at. He always understood where we were going and what we were doing. And then GPS, they really are maybe one of the most influential seats at the table. They just really do a nice job understanding what we're trying to accomplish and supporting us in that. They do an awesome job. I've talked about Christy Pagel. She's helped us and is still helping us a lot with people because the people are a huge part of it. We have a EOS implementer that we work with, Barb, that does a really nice job helping us get through our quarterly strategy meetings. We have a vet that understands, Rochelle Beneke and her crew understands our model and does a nice job there. And we're thankful to be able to be working with Ag Business Solutions from a financial standpoint, doing financial analysis and consulting. And they've got a really good group that works with a lot of really good dairies. And so they've been very helpful. So those are some of the key people, I would say.
So as you talk about those different seats at the table, so it's not just that the people are different, but the way that they serve your team has probably changed a little bit too. You talked about your EOS implementer. So for listeners that aren't familiar, entrepreneurial operating systems, this is like pulled right out of the book Traction by Gino Wickman, right? And you have someone that comes and facilitates these quarterly meetings that allow you to stay on track with Traction, which is that program that the book talks about. Same thing I use in my business too, although mine's a lot smaller. I don't have nearly as many cows as you. But core fundamentally, like it's future planning strategy. And so the person that you mentioned that assists you with that, is that someone that you found within the dairy industry? Or is this a case where you had to look outside of it to think bigger than what you already knew to get the help that you wanted?
Yeah, she doesn't know anything about cows. It's funny if we'll be writing our quarterly rocks on the board or whatever we're writing on the board or issues and like no, heifer is HEIFER, terms like haylage but it doesn't matter. That's not what we're not hiring her to advise us on how to milk cows. She's helping us organize our business and stay, like you said, stay on track. And that's her role. She does a good job at it, right?
So that has become something your dad probably did not have, him and his brothers did not have, was an EOS implementer on their team.
No, for sure not. No. It's gotten just so complex that we need that. Oh, they like looking at our scorecard, they kind of get a kick out of it. We show it to them, but it's just different than the way that they did things.
Yeah. And it's the evolution. And as you said, they have ways of doing things that were kind of ahead of their time with some of the team meetings and conversations and things like that. This is just that evolution and formalization of probably some things that they kind of sort of did, but now you just have a dedicated process around it. We talked about nutritionists, vets, things like that. How is it different now than it was for you when you first came back to the dairy? What do you look for from that person, and how's it changed?
I need that person to help me manage the business, right? Being another set of eyes and helping me to empower my people also, like teaching, looking at protocols, analyzing some data. I don't need a vet to arm a cow, right? When I came back to the dairy, we still did vet check with the vet every week. And now I've got guys that are sharp enough to run our own ultrasound machine. And if I didn't let them, they'd go somewhere that did. And so it doesn't make any sense for me to not let them do that. I need a consultant. I don't need somebody to treat cows.
So you've really evolved in what your needs are. But again, I'm going to peel that back and say that goes back to kind of this overall theme of just having conversations that allowed for a transition. But something else I want to revisit, Tommy, that you mentioned earlier, you said that when you came back, that when your generation came back to the dairy, that you weren't great leaders. And there were things that changed with employees and employees that worked for the older generation and responded differently, or maybe you responded differently than they did. But like, just walk me through a little bit, because I appreciate you being honest with yourself and saying, I recognize, we weren't great leaders at that time. What did that look like? When you look back on what you would call not being great leaders, how did that show up?
You have to be able to hold people accountable, and nobody wants to be accountable to somebody they don't believe in. And a lot of the people that were working in the business at the time had no reason to believe in us. We had no track record to go on. And we wanted to do things different. Not always better, but different. And some people were unwilling to do that. And probably our tactics to try to get them to do that were not always wise. We just had a different vision for how we would manage the business. I'm trying to think of how to answer that question, Peggy, because getting upset and trying to force somebody to do things your way isn't the best way to do things. And probably some of that, not probably, some of that was sometimes the strategy, right? Not communicating well. You have to communicate really, really well with people and be really upfront with expectations. But you have to be the one that is able to set the expectation too. And sometimes for a couple of years there was competing expectations between the generations. And the one thing that we did find, and I think I've said this before when talking to you, we found that it is okay for the generations to kind of be at odds against each other, but not within the generation. Our generation has to stay very aligned on the direction that we're going and what we're doing in our strategy, right? So it's okay for us to be at odds with the senior generation as long as we are fully aligned with each other and within our own generation.
So you talk about the alignment of the generations with each other, within each other. But then prior to that, you also talked about being someone that the employees and the teams could believe in, so that they would want to do the things that were asked of them and required of them and be accountable. But you identified that key part was being someone they could believe in first. These are things that you didn't learn at college. Most people don't. Like, you don't know until you're in it. You don't know until you look back.
We probably tried for too long with some people to get them to believe in us. Honestly, there are some people that we should have parted ways with sooner. You need to have a process, right? You need to have a process of setting an expectation. And when there's not performance, you have to take action, and you have to move through a process of commitment and engagement and all those things. If they're unwilling to work with you, you have to be willing to take the next step and say, this isn't working out. We're going to do corrective action. We're going to change position. We're going to do these other things. But you have to have a process for that. We had no process for a long time. And that's what I mean by poor leadership.
I think you guys are being hard on yourselves, right? Like, poor leadership is like you're doing what so many other people do. You are doing your best with what you know and with the information that you have from your own experiences. It's just that it didn't work anymore. And you had to find a way to make something that worked. And going back to that piece of what you said, like getting people to believe in you and your generation, what was effective? Like, what would you say were the good things that you did that led to the desired result of engagement, retention, loyalty?
I think the first thing was probably doing annual reviews. Because I remember the first year I did those, I did every annual review that year, and I did them all in a legal pad. And I didn't really I had kind of an outline, like, what do you like about working here? What do you don't like? What could improve? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Just asking questions like that. And now it's really more formalized. It's through our payroll system. Each employee can rate themselves. Their supervisor can rate them. It's just a really good opportunity to communicate with people about issues and then just doing a lot of, like, we started at the management level with personality profiles and doing all the things that using all these tools to understand what people's strengths are, making sure that sometimes you have a really good person that's just in a bad role. I think it's using those tools to figure out what people's strengths are, make sure they're the right person in the right seat. And then if they're not, you got to start either getting them to be the right person and then you have to decide, is this a person that we want to invest in? Sometimes the answer is no.
Was that a hard part of this whole transition thing too?
Yeah, for sure. If it is a yes, let's make a plan and stick to it. Don't make a plan and then be like, well, they didn't fulfill the obligations of the contract we made, if you will. You just can't make excuses for that.
So this goes back to one of the things that it sounds like your generation really implemented, and that was processes. Processes that allowed you to have accountability, that allowed you to have something that you could hold up and something concrete, something tangible to be able to make these decisions as you transitioned into ownership and management and decided who's a good fit to be on your team moving forward, whether, like we talked about the advisor side, but then this is on the employee side, who's going to be on the team and who is in alignment with that vision and that mission and is comfortable moving at the pace that you want to move at. So Tommy, we've covered a lot today. And in the few minutes before you got to go here, I want you to talk to the generation above you and the generation below you. So for the older generation that you end up interacting with in the dairy industry and that are maybe holding on to some of this management and ownership and haven't made the plan or haven't carried through, the conversations have stalled, what is the thing that you would want that generation to know based on your experience?
No matter how well trained the next generation is, they're not going to get away without making any mistakes, doing something that you wouldn't do. You have to make your own mistakes. Sometimes it's costly, but you have to be willing to give them the freedom to do that and then I think for the next generation, it's probably going to have to be them that takes the bull by the horns to get the succession plan done. That was our experience. We had to really take ownership of that thing and push it through. You're not going to do it for free. It's going to take an investment of time and money to get it done.
Let me ask you this. If you guys had not taken the action you did when you did, where do you think you'd be now? Where would Swisslane be now?
I probably still wouldn't be there. There's just so many opportunities in the world right now. And there's been a lot of times I didn't feel like it was moving fast enough for me, but I feel like it has moved at an appropriate pace, even though I'm usually the antsy one to be on to the next step.
And how many years did it take to actually have something inked?
Well, having something inked took a couple years, but then for me, it's been just in the last 2 years to feel like I've actually have meaningful ownership in the dairy, be honest with you. Because it takes, you don't get equity overnight. Like, it's taken 10 years to actually start to build some net worth in the business. So you got to be a little patient too. And then realizing that, okay, net worth is only on paper. I can't go cash that out. So now the challenge of our generation is how are we going to access our net worth in the next 10 years? Some of it. And I don't have the answer to that question yet, but we're working on it.
So Tommy, again, always a pleasure to have you and to have these real conversations. And this one about succession and transition of the farm, of the business, and throughout the family. And just appreciate your honesty in how it worked out for you, what was hard, how you overcame those challenges, and also the strengths of how you guys all came together to do the thing that 75% of family farms have yet to do. So congratulations to you for doing it, for living it, and for looking ahead to the future and having big goals to go after. Anything else you want to share as we wrap up today?
You know this, but we don't also think we have it all figured out. It's still an ongoing process. We feel like we've been able to maybe outpace some of our competition on it and been able to work really well through the process. But man, there is not a rubric out there that is like one size fits all to get this done. We've had to go through multiple mediators and lawyers, and if something's not fitting, you got to move on and find somebody to help you. And it has not just been easy, and we haven't done everything right, but we've done what we thought was best. So that would be my kind of disclaimer. Not a one size fits all program out there, I don't think, because every family situation is different, but it is possible. I believe if we could do it, anybody can do it.
On that note, Tommy, thanks again for jumping on with us and for just sharing the real stuff about how this went. And also, this is a success story of a plan that was finished as an action and is moving forward and moving at the speed at which Swisslane wants to grow and continue to grow. And we've got some awesome podcasts in our feed at Uplevel Dairy with some of these previous conversations that you and I have had, Tommy, and I'll make sure that there's links to those in our show notes for some of the listeners that want to go back and dig into some of the stories that we've had and the conversations we've had leading up to this one. And I think they all kind of hit a little bit different note, but also hit dairy producers in a real place of where they're at and where they're going and how they can get there too. And so thank you so much for jumping on with me, Tommy.
It's always an honor to be here with you, Peggy. Thanks for having me. Look forward to the next one.
This conversation is a sneak peek at the expertise we are bringing to farmers on March 27th at the Farm Forward Conference, a one-day event to empower farmers to take action on their transition and succession plans. This will take place at the Farm Wisconsin Discovery Center in Newton, Wisconsin, and include a light breakfast, lunch, and a packed day of deep dive training. including family farm coach Elaine Fraze, followed by an afternoon of transition talks and a panel featuring Will McKinley from Men Law, as well as Christy Pagel from Leading Edge Consulting, Steve Bodart from AgriGrowth Solutions, and Tommy Oesch of Swisslane Farms. You can find information about the Farm Forward Conference and register today by going to upleveldairy.com under the Farm Forward Conference tab. Thank you for listening to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to follow the show, share this episode with your friends in the dairy community, and leave a review. At Uplevel Dairy, we're here to highlight the leaders, the lessons, and the real-world experiences that are shaping the future of our dairy industry. Find more by following us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram for behind-the-scenes content and upcoming guests. And subscribe at upleveldairy.com to get new episodes and our Dairy Insights blogs right in your inbox. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and until next time, keep on learning, keep on leading, and keep up-leveling your dairy.